What did the bully do at your school that made you think that's too far? Belted some kid with a chunk of wood, 2x4, for talking to his girl. Kid got a depressed skull fracture or some shit. Bully went to jail. 5th grade. She mercilessly bullied the shortest smallest kid in class every day. She called him midget and other things like that. I distinctly remember the day she shoved him to the ground outside of school. That was when I knew I had to stay away from her no matter what. About 5 years later, her and her boyfriend were involved in the murder of her mom and sister. They found her trying to run away to Mexico. Completely horrifying and heartbreaking situation. A group of kids liked to piss off this real nice teacher because they said he was creepy, so one day they played a prank where one of them pretended to hang themselves and he had a stroke because of it. I like annoying teachers and all, but even I was like, holy shit. While I was in junior high, there was this guy in my grade. He was incredibly nice, super sweet to everyone, and never realized when people were making fun of him. His name was Brian, and he had Down syndrome. One day these 3 kids decided to start picking on him. They started making fun of him. Brian never really realized when someone was being sarcastic or making fun of him, so he would just smile and try to talk to them and be the nice guy he was. These 3 kids decided to take it further and started pushing him. I told them they needed to fuck off. Their reaction was to push him to the ground and hold him there until he was crying and telling me to do something about it. Now I've always been a bigger guy. I was probably 6 feet 0 inches and 200 pounds back in 7th grade. I also grew up as the youngest of 5 boys, meaning I got the shit kicked out of me by my brothers on a daily basis. So I had some good knowledge on how to protect myself, but outside of with my brothers, had never had a fight before. I ended up breaking one of the kids' nose, one ended up with broken ribs, and the third just got a bloody lip. I still say they deserve to get beaten much worse. After it was all said and done, the 3 of them were suspended for 3 days. I was suspended for 3 as well. But after my mom heard what happened and why I was fighting, I got a 3-day vacation from school and a new game for my GameCube. My mom always taught me right from wrong and was nothing but proud of me. I went to a boarding school. Some kid got pinned down by 2 guys while another bounced his balls on his face. This kid got at Mr. Ball Bouncy by pissing into a water bottle and pouring it all over his room. Both were kicked out. They tied some kid's gym locker up with his t-shirt, but before they did they squirted mustard all over his clothes. I helped him get his locker back open. They weren't happy, but I was a varsity wrestler, so they didn't mess with me. This group of guys went to my middle and high school. They bullied me in 6th grade, and out of everyone I'd met until that point, I knew them to be the most likely to do something actually violent. 3 years ago, in 9th grade, a kid I had never met, but who was also in the same grade and at the same school, was beaten to death in an alleyway with 3 teenagers as suspects. I live in Florida, but in a nicer part that doesn't have as much Florida man type things happening too often. Anyways, my dad was the one who had initially told me about the murder because I hadn't, and still don't, pay attention to local news much. I thought back to the kids who bullied me way in the beginning of middle school, and I remember specifically listing their names and promising that they were at least a part of it. Sure enough, 2 of the 3 involved were those stupid ass bullies from way back when. The third was actually an old friend. He was a decent person, but his family wasn't, and overall he was an impressionable person surrounded by the wrong people. It doesn't exactly fit with the story, but this thread made me remember a funny incident where one of my friends at the time suddenly decided he was going to become a hardest and get all the respect and babes by picking on the weird kid. It was totally random because he was a nice, pretty quiet kid before that. But anyway, he walked up to the weird kid all Billy Badass and said, "That's my chair. What are you doing in my chair before class?" The weird kid just calmly sits there and quite rightly points out there's no assigned seating. So Billy Badass suddenly pushes him and tried to get him in a headlock. So the weird kid just bit him on the arm really hard enough to break the skin, and sent him to the hospital for tetanus shots. This was back in the days when school administrators still were allowed to have some common sense, so the principal just called them both into the office, figured out what happened, and said to Billy Badass, "You got what you deserved," and said to the weird kid, "Don't bite anyone else." that is dangerous and very weird, and then made them shake on it, and that was that. The first and last day of my old junior high friend's decision to be a badass and get popular by picking on the weird kid. Stole the wheelchair of a disabled girl. Now thing was, everyone liked this girl, so there was a cry for blood. They expelled him after threats were made against the administrators. Literally smeared shit on this one autistic kid, who bit the tip of his finger off after. Tried to beat the shit out of the nicest guy in school. Nice guy was huge. Not fat, but big ahead of the rest of us. But he wouldn't fight back. Just kept getting hit on the way to his next class. He turned around once, and we thought it was on. But then he calmed himself down, turned the other cheek, and walked to class. I was amazed. So much class 2 of my buddies and myself beat the shit out of the bully the next day. Told him never to fuck with big guy again. He never did. I wish I had the ability to turn the other cheek like that back then. Had to learn the hard way much later in life. One bully at my school pushed a kid down the stairs, where there were shards of glass at the bottom, which he landed on. The bully was expelled in anger management, probation, and juvie for a short time. The kid's okay. He has serious scars though. There was a toilet in the locker room that quit working. Someone used it anyways, and it sat for a couple weeks. Kid filled someone's water bottle with it. Disgustingest thing ever. In college someone pulled a prank on a Jewish guy by putting a shaving cream swastika on his door. Uncalled for but not outrageous. His response to the girl he only suspected had done it was to print hundreds of copies he had of her naked playing strip poker all over the campus with the caption, "This girl is cheap and easy." It wasn't even her who did it. After he had done this he was bragging how he had just gotten started. I finally stepped in and said he had already taken it too far as it is. Unfortunately he stopped there. Happened off of school grounds, but 2 bullies, girls, from my school were walking in their neighborhood and saw another girl from school in front of her house. They demanded she give them her jacket, and when she refused one held her, while the other one set the girl's hair on fire. Luckily she saved herself from serious damage. Maybe she stopped, dropped, and rolled. I don't know. Bullies got expelled. Before that they'd served multiple suspensions for other incidents. It was more like my entire 8th grade class. I guess one girl sent a nude to a guy who pretended to be interested, and then he shared it all around the school. Instead of acting horrified, everyone was like, "Yo, have you seen redacted S nudes?" They even asked right over her. Like, I was walking to class behind her, and 2 people on either side of her, who were talking to each other about the recent drama. Needless to say, John Mulaney really had a point when he said 13-year-olds are the meanest people on earth. He beat a teacher until she was unconscious. When she called him out on his bullshit, he got expelled for it, and so for a while there was no lead bully in my grade. Eventually one of his friends rose up to take his mantle and continued the age-old bully traditions, but thankful never to the extent of beating anyone unconscious. He wasn't a bully, he was just a psychopath. His father would pay people to spend time with him, but literally no one in my town ever would. He hit my friend Pete over the head with a shovel and tied him up and threw carpenter nails at him. One time, he took a stick and a belt and beat the shit out of himself, leaving bruises and welts all over his body. He told his parents me and my friend did it to him, and they called the cops. I had to explain to my mother that this kid was known for being a complete psychopath. Total school shooter material, if that was a thing back then. Knew about a guy who abused stray dogs. Everyone agreed the guy was going to kill someone. When he went too far was when they found a dead dog in a dumpster in the back with knife wounds. He didn't get charged with anything cause it was circumstantial at best, but everyone knew he did it. Glad I moved out of state after my first year of high school. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.